For the Envelope Live in the Los Angeles Times, I'm Mark Olsen. It's my pleasure to be here today for a conversation about the film Mass. Ever since the movie premiered earlier this year at the Sundance Film Festival, it's really been moving audiences with its simple story of a complex dynamic between two sets of parents meeting for the first time. One set of parents lost their son in the school shooting. The other set of parents, their son was the shooter. And we're so excited to have the core creative team for the film here for this conversation. We have writer and director Fran Kranz. And then from the cast, we have Reed Birney, Dowd, Jason Isaacs, and Martha Plimpton. Thank you to all of you for joining us today. It's really great to have you. Fran, I'll start with a question for you, which is simply, nearly every review of the film has made mention of the fact that it is at its core just these four people in a room, and will say something to the effect of, this seems like a play, it could have been a play. And in some ways, I'm curious for you, it's almost like an existential question of what to you made this story a movie, and in particular made you want to have this be your debut as a filmmaker.
Well, look, I love the idea or hope, I guess, that people can gather together or meet face to face across a table from one another, as it were, and with people they feel differences with and even blame and hate towards, but work through that through talking and listening, work through their differences, work through these resentments towards a better place, towards a more healing place. I love that idea. 20 years ago, when I learned about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa, I was so inspired by it and watched recordings of amnesty hearings and was so moved by it. And when I was researching the subject matter, I didn't have a movie in mind or a story or anything. I was reading about it. I was a new parent and I wanted to know more about what was happening in this country. And that's what they're doing. They're trying to find a way forward and find healing. And they have this hope that there can be change. And I was so moved again and kind of made that connection with, that's a story, that's a movie. I want to dramatize that. I want to celebrate what these people are doing. So that was kind of the genesis of it. I never had any question. There was never any question in my mind that it should take place in a room and uninterrupted, that the conversation had to be uninterrupted that way.
And then for the actors, all four of you have such a strong background, both in theater work and in screen work in both TV and film. And so I'm curious, do you approach those those projects differently? And for example, do you approach this project as a film differently than you would if it was a theater piece? I'm sort of wondering how, if it affects the way that you prepare for the role, the way you're performing, because the movie very much is a movie, but I'm just curious how you prepare for something that is still so sort of intimate and still in a room.
I suppose the preparation is different because, of course, in the theater you rehearse, for 3 weeks at least. Connection with character, I would imagine, is very similar. We rehearsed for 2.5 days, came to know and trust one another, work our way through the text, went away and did our homework, so to speak, privately in the way that each of us do, different for everyone. And when we came together, we were ready in the sense that we trusted ourselves and each other. And having done it a few times, just give it everything you have and go home. How's that for simplifying the whole thing?
And Reed, what was it like for you? How did you sort of come to approach the project?
Well, it's an interesting question, Mark, because I don't think we've been asked that before. I think our stage background, for me anyway, came in enormously helpful in that we had 10 pages, 12 pages of dialogue to learn for every day. So, we maybe have that muscle. pretty well developed
Good point.
to learn that kind of language. But the difference, I think, because it was not rehearsed like a play, you counted on it happening in the room. And we were very lucky, I think, that we all were able to play off each other in the most thrilling way. And I could see while we were filming it that everybody was bringing their A game, and the bar was very high.
And Jason, for you, did you do any kind of research, or I don't know if you had time to, meet with parents or who've been through this school shooting? Like, what did you do to prepare for the role?
Well, for me, the film is about, it's about the present. It's everything about, as Reed said, what unfolds in the room. And the big difference between a play and what we do is, first of all, I don't think it's anything like a play, this piece, because the camera can see how much everyone is hiding. You couldn't see that from an audience in the theater. It's going to be more demonstrative. You have to reach the back row. And what makes this filmic is that there are so many layers of denial and disassociation, all the things, all the layers that get peeled away during the film. But there's something about practicing what's going to happen in the room that I don't really like. It's true I have a theatre background, but I love the fact that I had no idea what was going to happen on the day. So my research is not about people who've tragically been in school shootings. It's about what did Martha and I, what are our characters, what's our life been specifically? And what did we agree on the way to this meeting? What made us, who went to therapy first? Martha and I spent a lot of time talking about what their rules were for each other. And of course, we couldn't agree because Jay and Gail wouldn't have agreed, because married couples never agree about the things that they've resolved before. And to work out what the details of our, when and if we stop sleeping in the same room, how many days a week I'm away, who cries himself to sleep, what we say to our daughter, all the absolute specifics, so that when we're in the room and there is a glancing reference and there's a grenade, there's a trigger moment, we know what it is. The audience might never know, but we knew for each other that everything that unfolds spontaneously in the room, because we didn't practice it, is built on a landscape, a whole architecture of history. Because speaking to people who've been through some terrible tragedy, whether it's a earthquake or a shooting or a drunken car crash, it's not really relevant. This is about people trying to find. For me, the film is about the incredibly difficult power and necessity of forgiveness, forgiving themselves, forgiving other people, and what brought us to the room. What terrible state are we in that brings us to this room today? And then, as Reed said, you get in there, and I would look at these other three extraordinary actors, and it made it easy because I would just react to them and try and change them.
And Martha, I've read where you, before you even agreed to participate in the project, sort of insisted that there be some rehearsal time worked in, and I'm curious why that was, like what going into it you sort of saw that you needed that time, and did you get what you needed from even though it's just a few days of rehearsal?
Well, I would only qualify that I insisted. I didn't insist, really. I mean,
oh, come on now.
Oh, Mark.
Yeah.
I didn't. I did strongly suggest.
Yes. Yeah.
That Fran and I met. Mm-hmm. We met for coffee or wine or both. I can't remember. And
I could guess.
We talked about what this film, might entail, and what was possible for it, and we talked about. I had worked with Sidney Lumet on a film called Running on Empty. And Sidney, having come from a live television background, was adamant about rehearsal and really approached his filmmaking very methodically that way. I mean, he rehearsed his films as though they were plays. I mean, truly, he taped everything out of the set. We had props, and we, after a period of 2 weeks, we were running it like a play. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And I thought that, and Fran agreed, of course, we had a great conversation about it, that would be a really helpful way for us to approach this film, just because of the nature of the writing and the intimacy and the fact that it's all in one room. Now, of course, that was an attractive idea to Fran and to me, but of course we didn't have the resources, nor did we, were we able to get all of us actors together in the same room for the same period. There were so many reasons why it just wasn't feasible. And I think in the end, that probably was really okay. And I think we all felt, or at least I felt, that 2.5 days of rehearsal was somehow enough. I mean, the relationships that we developed in that 2.5 days were so fast and so deep. Mm-hmm. And I mean, luckily so, gratefully so, we liked each other immediately. And I think we maybe got through the script fully, maybe once. But I think we felt that was enough. And as Reed said, discovering it and it unfolding in the room ended up being really marvelous and really kind of miraculous, because as I've said it before, I feel very much that this screenplay of Fran's, more than a play, it reads to me like a piece of music. And it was really wonderful to be able to, as everyone has already said, to, work with these extraordinary people and play that piece of music and hear it and be surprised by it, and be taken away with it. That was a very powerful thing, very beautiful thing. And I think also we've sort of joked that I don't know if we would have been able to handle 2 weeks of rehearsal. We might have blown our brains out, but you know what I mean? It was just like, it would be just, I think it might have been just gilding the lily a bit, just if that makes sense.
Well, so I'm glad we didn't get through performing it to each other, because I had no idea what any of you were going to do, and I had no idea what I was going to do. And I'm glad that I hadn't seen it in that room in New York until it happened on camera.
And Fran, as Martha was just saying, the once you get those 4 characters at that table in that room, it in theory is just one scene, but it still has this flow and structure to it that is really fascinating. And I'm wondering if you knew that was going to happen in the writing, or was it something once you had the actors performing, or even in editing? How did you sort of come to just have the structure of those scenes within the scene?
Yeah, look, it's a great question, and the writing process was difficult because I tried to play these parts, right? I'm an actor, and so I didn't really know how else to do it. So it was almost like improvisation, and sort of really forcing myself to see the situation from each of these 4 unique perspectives. But what happened, it was a bit crazy making, in the sense that I would come up with obstacles. I'd hit these dead ends with myself, arguing with myself as these 4 characters. And there was a lot of stopping and starting. And so the script was challenging in the sense that for a long time, for a good part of the writing process, it was very fragmented. It was just all these little scenes, because it was very hard for me to get through the conversation. So I was very aware of the beats, because I developed the script that way in fragments. It was later in the writing process where I just said, well, look, conversations, real people, that they speak with redundancies. They contradict themselves. Conversations are messy, especially a difficult conversation that would be so emotional. So I embraced this idea that there might be sort of a sort of circuitous kind of strange journey in how this conversation would flow. It was sad to break it up in the room, but it was for the sake of the production, the sanity of the production. We had to break it up into little scenes for each day. But at the same time, yes, I was very aware from the sort of year-long writing process, the kind of the ebbs and flows and the sort of the peaks and valleys, and the, as Martha said, the sort of music of the conversation. I had a good sense of what I wanted, but there was always this kind of risk in breaking it up. I know some of the actors have said they didn't want to stop shooting. You didn't want to stop the scene because there's this general sort of flow and force behind the conversation, but it's just the nature of filming.
And I think one of my favorite things about the film is that as much as it's about these two couples that are meeting, you get such a strong sense of the internal dynamics between each of those couples. Can you talk a little bit for you? We don't directly hear what has happened in the marriage of Linda and Richard. Like, we don't know like when they split up, how that sort of happened. For you, what was it like to have those sort of like secret dynamics between you and Reed?
I just listening to what Fran said, what an extraordinary way to put this together. I know you've spoken of it, but just stepping into the lives of each character. But to answer your question, being with Reed, everything made sense in terms of their relationship. Perhaps unlike Martha and Jason, we did not discuss our history. Somehow, because it had ended, it made tremendous sense to us. And we just didn't, because that's the essence of the relationship, isn't it? They can't communicate, never really could in a way that suited them both. So in the way that Fran wrote it, the very subtle but clear reference to their not being together made all the sense in the world. And being with Martha and Jason, as soon as I met them, I could not imagine anyone else in the roles. They just were those people. Speaks to who they are as actors, who they are as human beings, and to what Fran wrote. Everything just seemed to fall in place. And the conversations that were necessary happened, and the ones that weren't necessary, that we sorted out on our own, didn't happen. It was a terrific bit of chemistry, if you will, and we kept our hands off it.
And Reed, what was it like for you to have that sort of dynamic both with Anne, sort of the two of you as a couple, and then how you sort of approached the other couple in the conversation?
It's so interesting because just hearing Annie talk about it, I love in the table work saying, what did we do together in high school? And, what if we, just coming up with the backstory. And not only did we not talk about our past, we didn't talk about not talking about it. There wasn't a like, should we talk? No, it just never occurred to us.
Yeah,
weirdly.
that's right.
To talk about, to theorize about what happened. Because I feel like I knew. And Fran's writing, I love in so many parts of the script, things are not explicitly stated. There isn't a lot of, when we met for coffee 3 days ago and we, it's like, because we all know what we did. And we don't, the audience will figure it out. And I love the mystery in our relationship because you really don't know how long they've been apart and what happened. But clearly obviously something happened. And there's no reason they should be together. They both took their marbles and went home. So it was very unusual for me, is the point of the story here, that I didn't want to nail all kinds of stuff down. Just didn't even need to. Never thought of it.
Plus, we didn't really like each other, Reed and I, so we didn't speak.
We didn't speak at all the entire shoot.
Well, no one liked you. To be fair, no one liked you.
Fran, was that a challenge for you to know what to make explicit and what to hold back? I mean, even I marked it down. It's not until about 35 minutes into the movie that we even realize sort of which couple is the parents of the shooter and which couple is the parents of someone who, one of the victims.
I love
was
that.
It what was it like for you to sort of decide like how to dole out information in the film?
Yeah, well, that was a challenge, or something that was always on my mind in the writing process, and I needed help. I often you get too close to the material, right? So I tried to be very open with notes, and I sent the script to people, and I would always ask that question, does it sound like these people are saying things they would already know, right? And even in that short rehearsal process, it was another kind of priority to sort of excavate the text and really comb it for no, I think he would know this, or maybe this information would have been made public, that kind of stuff. And, like Reed said, they're not coming in and saying, that time we went for coffee 3 days ago. There's no reason. These people know what happens. There's no reason to explicitly state it, right? And, speaking to that one moment in particular, about 35 minutes in, I was very defensive and protective of that moment because I in the edit, I remember we got some notes and, people said, hey, that's really the end of Act 1, right? Whatever that means. And, that should really come at about minute 30. And I'd push back saying that's exactly why it should not come at minute 30. Like, it cannot come that soon because these people have no reason to say it. The only reason it's ever said is because she's angry, is because she's fighting with Richard. It comes out of emotion. It's not exposition, and so making sure information was doled out in a truthful way, the way people would really speak in this situation was that was kind of the microscope, we were always trying to, put on the script and the material and the text. Yeah.
But he's so brilliant in having that prologue with Judy and Anthony, because they can then say, how long have you been working on the case? 6 years. You know what I mean? You can get all that information the way Anthony and Judy would get it.
Yeah, right.
Also, I it's so remarkable to me. There's a moment, it's like Chekhov's Kleenex box, where there's a conversation about this Kleenex box and if it should be on the table or not, and it's not. And then Martha, you eventually go and get the Kleenex box and put it in front of Anne, like so angrily. It's like the most mad gesture of have a Kleenex I've ever seen. And it's there's no dialogue there. It's not.
It gets a huge laugh. In the cinema, that got a laugh every time, which is an extraordinary thing to have a laugh in the middle of a moment of such heightened emotion.
But Martha, can you talk about that moment a little bit, to have something that is wordless? I'm not even sure how it would be scripted, and what could be a very simple gesture becomes so sort of complicated and full of meaning.
Yeah, I mean, I think, as Reed said, as everyone said in their own way, I think, Fran's script was so meticulous. There's not an extraneous word or moment or beat in the thing. It's just, it's masterful and it's meticulous. And I think when each of us read it, we all sort of find, each of us as characters and by extension as actors, we all can see where those little moments are, those little moments of frisson or whatever that, again, like in a piece of music, where there's a little bit of a crescendo, or maybe a little bit of picking up the pace, or maybe there's a little bit of silence, and I think that Anne and I just sort of navigated that part of the screenplay, or that section of the scene in a natural and as natural a way as we could. And for me, I think that the, I don't want to unpack it too much. I'd rather, that people be able to see it and think about what it means to them when I put that Kleenex box down so firmly. But I think to me, it's a little bit of a few things. It's a little bit of, it's anger. It's also politeness. It's also sort of saying, how dare you? You think, you know what I mean? How dare you start sobbing right now?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's a little bit of all of those things. And I think that when Gail does it, when she does it, she maybe feels even a little bit guilty right after, your feelings or your emotions during the day, they're not static. They fluctuate. They move up and down. You feel like a fool. You feel a fool, when you've expressed something, or you maybe said something out of turn or out of hand. You know what I mean? It's just.
But I don't know if you planned that moment, Martha. I don't remember ever there being a discussion about how to put the Kleenex box down. You just did it.
Yeah.
And then it's in the viewing, you're like, oh my God, this is so revealing. But it's like so much of the movie, we just were in it and we're just doing it.
And Martha,
Yeah.
you know, it's funny when you say that, I took it, or I remember feeling a connection to you, meaning to Gail, that you were somehow seeing me, Linda, and
Right.
letting me in.
It's a little bit of everything. It's a little bit of both. That's why I say, you know, it's anger and it's how dare you, but it's also, you know,
you're taking care of her.
Yeah,
Reed,
he needs a Kleenex. And also, you know, these people know each other. And Gail and Linda have a relationship that precedes coming into this room. They've written each other letters. They have a connection that began already. And so, you know, there's also that, you know. But I think what I'm trying to say is that there's something so marvelous about this screenplay because there's so much room for the actors. It's one of the most generous screenplays I've ever read for actors. And I think as actors, it's the kind of thing that you absolutely dream of receiving and being able to, you know, and being able to work on, being able to interpret.
You know, Martha, you say it's meticulously written, and it absolutely is. And yet it also feels like it's completely unfolding in an unwritten way.
Yes.
The way
Never felt like acting ever, did it?
No.
That's why Fran said it came from him improvising. You know, you could feel all those things.
I think that meticulousness makes that possible. I don't think anything other than absolute attention and you know, really being expert and really being specific and thoughtful and meticulous in that way. I think that's the only way to really afford that sort of naturalism in an ironic way, you know.
There's a paradox though, isn't there? It's like if you look at, sorry, Fran, for this slightly obnoxious comparison. If you look at Shakespeare, you know, there's not only the brilliance on the page, but you can play scenes any one of 100 ways. With great writing, you could actually do it a million ways. You could have handled the tissues compassionately. Instead, the entire movie is in that moment. How fucking dare you make this about yourself when we've come here so that I can, and I know where I need to get to, and I know what my husband's thinking I ought to be doing right now. All those layers are in that moment. And the screenplay allowed you to do that. It didn't say she slams the tissue box down. But in any moment, the stem cell of the entire movie can be there as an actor if you want it to be.
Yeah.
That's right.
That's the most pretentious thing I've ever said about anything I've ever said.
It's pretty good, Jason. Pretty good. Pretty out there.
I mean, I don't know how to I don't know how to sit here and listen to all these compliments about Shakespeare comparison. And also I've always been in front of a staircase. You're just remembering this wrong. Look, these guys, you know, so much the most critical stage of the writing process was that rehearsal, and it was getting these actors, because I asked them what was wrong with it. I tried to just listen to them and change the script accordingly and try to give them whatever they felt they needed. And I can think of instances where each actor took real ownership of the text, made, you know, we developed or collaborated to sort of find the changes that we needed to make to get them to where they needed to go. And you know, look, I if they're going to compliment the screenplay, like I've never seen more movies in a year in my life because I have to feel like I need to see everything now that I have one. And these are the best performances of the year. And I don't even know what anyone could possibly be looking at or thinking otherwise. What they do is a collective.
Lucky you're not biased, isn't it?
No. I just think what you see as an ensemble is so rare. And the heavy lifting that they all do and the playing off one another. And it's a kind of a thing of, it's really a special thing. So,
let me cut short this nauseating flattery and flatter you back as a director. You did something extraordinary as a director, not just as a writer. There are moments like the thing that between Martha and I, clearly she's been to a therapist and I've been to some sessions, and that's what's brought us here to try and get something done. And when I asked you, I don't know if maybe both of us asked you, what happened? You know, when did we go to therapy and who dragged who into it? And you went, oh, I don't know. No, it's a lie. You're being disingenuous. You wrote the thing. You must have had an idea, but you made us, all four of us, if we wanted to, come up with all the specifics that made those moments in the room hum. And that's a generous thing to do as a director and as a first-time writer, but as a director, it's really smart because, as you say, it gives the people who are playing it ownership, because we had to invent the life on which this scene is built. And it's kind of brave as a director not to try and control every moment. And it works.
And Jason, I want to be sure to ask you as well. There's a moment where your character and Reed, you have a brief exchange where you sort of start to talk about, you know, gun policy and mental health and the sort of political issues that are around what's being discussed here. And it's funny, just as a viewer, you feel it kind of derail what you've actually been watching. And then Anne and Martha, their characters both are like, let's not have that conversation now. And what did it mean to you, Jason, that like, how did you feel in that moment that like you could easily see this becoming a more sort of political movie or people having that sort of conversation? And what did it mean to you that like that the movie sort of studiously avoids that? Like that's not what's happening in this movie.
It's the reason I wanted to be in the film. It's not. It's. There's no part of it. There's any kind of political polemic. It's about the need for forgiveness, as you know, a kind of human contact, and what why it's so brilliantly written. The Jay, the character I play, is so convinced that the solution to the pain he feels is outside himself, in politics, in activism, in psychiatric definitions, in school policies, whatever it is, in his wife. I come to that room determined to fix my wife. There's things she needs to say and stuff the therapist has prescribed that she needs to do. And great writing has all those layers of self-deception in it where the audience senses something that the characters don't know. And so I love the fact that he's getting onto comfortable turf there. There's stuff he does every day. He makes these speeches every day and they're entirely impersonal. And, you know, that's what's universal about this film and this story, that everybody knows everybody has this notion of people in the world who are to blame, terrible people who, whether it's the vaccine debate or it's politics, or in my country, it's Brexit or it's immigration, whatever it is, there are people we think we know, and there are reasons we think we hate them and reasons we think they're stupid. And we're much more comfortable dealing in those abstracts than actually looking and talking to human beings and finding out who they are. And I thought I think that's both brilliant writing and a joy to play, but also odd that some of the people who are writing about the film, even when they're sharing it with praise, miss that it isn't a film that deals with that at all. It's entirely about human connection.
And Reed, what was that moment like for you as well? Because it's so interesting in that your character, in some ways, I don't mean this disrespectfully, it seems the most unexamined. Like he's the one who is like the most locked off from his own feelings, and he also, I think, would be more comfortable having this sort of like other conversation than the actual conversation they're having.
I think
you can see the men going off and talking about this for an hour if they were let.
Yes, I think Richard shows up there thinking that this is the conversation that Jay wants to have, that this is the conversation that's expected of him, that this is the conversation people have been having for the last 6 years about it. It's, you know, why I didn't want to come. I'm sick of this conversation. Also, I keep saying Richard's a wasp, and I think that's essential in that he does not want to look at his feelings. I'm making a sweeping generalization here, but I'm a wasp and I know something about this. I've done extensive research, and I think he very much thinks that this is not going to help. And he's been talked into it by the lawyers and the therapists and the whole thing. But I really find Richard the most tragic character because he is not leading anything like an examined life and is doomed to a life of despair and guilt and shame.
And Fran, unfortunately, I'm going to have to wrap this up soon, but I want to be sure to ask you that as the movie's had its life, since it premiered, I mean, honestly, since you wrote it, since it premiered at Sundance, and as it's been coming out, it has remained sadly and shockingly timely. And what has that meant to you? Like, how every time that there's another school shooting, while you've kind of been living with the movie, what do you think of? What does that do to you to see the movie still sort of like remain so necessary?
Yeah. I mean, I appreciate you asking it. I mean, the last few days, there's been moments that felt almost a little surreal, right?
Yeah.
And that I kind of, this movie's the story's fiction, right? Of course, but the events that inspired it are not. And I created, forgive me, I don't know how a better way of saying it, but sort of a Frankenstein's monster of one of these, right? I pulled from so many different of tragic events to sort of piece together a fictional one. And watching the news this week, there's a sort of surreal connection I have with this. I mean, look, I've had a real privilege and honor of getting to know some parents throughout the process. I had so much insecurity and sensitivity and concern around how real survivors or communities or victims and families would feel about this film. And I've met with people, and I've really alleviated those concerns, because I'm finding people really appreciate it, and it just resonates with people. It's look, ultimately it's about hope. It's, of course, there's themes of forgiveness and healing and reconciliation, but it's about moving through something to find a better place, a better path forward. And that resonates with everyone, and no matter what relationship you might have with grief, or even something like this kind of unspeakable tragedy. So I try to, it's been definitely an emotional burden for sure. I feel exhausted a lot, and sort of discouraged. But those connections that I make with audience members that are just moved on a sort of more human level, just a more universal level, it reinvigorates my sort of passion for this, to keep fighting for the movie and promoting it, But yeah, it's been the most rewarding professional journey of my life, but it's not been without, obviously some exhaustion and a lot of emotion. And it doesn't get easier at all when things like this happen.
And that's a lovely note for us to end on. I want to thank all of you for joining us today. Fran Kranz, Reed Birney, Ann Dowd, Jason Isaacs, and Martha Plimpton from Mass. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
For the LA Times and the Envelope, I'm Mark Olsen.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks,
Thank
Mark.
you. Bye, guys.
Mark, we're off air now, right? It's been stunning. We've done 1 billion interviews. No one has ever asked questions who's understood and really genuinely seen and heard the film like that.